we get started then? So pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to watch or listen to the meeting may do so by video conference over Zoom only. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be available, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite our best efforts, we will post on the Topsfield website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. I call the meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded via Zoom and also by Boxford Cable TV for future viewing at Topsfield Cable On Demand on the town website. Is there anyone else present who wishes to record the meeting? Okay, hearing none. So our first item on the agenda this evening is continuation of the public hearing on the petitioner's request for a conference and event facility special permit for the property located at 249 Rowley Bridge Road. Okay, Mr. Donhauser, you see that you're here. So if you would like to bring us up to date in terms of where we are and what you've accomplished, and I believe you have a sound engineer with you this evening. So if you would like to, as I said, bring us up to date.
Sure. Good evening. So last time we met, maybe just go back a couple steps. We had originally petitioned for this, and apparently the abutters notices got lost in the mail. So when we did get together the second time, which was the first time for the neighbors, it was, I think, new to a lot of people. So we took an opportunity to meet with the neighbors and heard their concerns. And then on a subsequent meeting, we also heard some additional concerns. So at that time, we had agreed to slow down a little bit and volunteered to complete an acoustic study, a traffic study, and a lighting study. So since the last meeting, we have been busy working through those. I'd say the traffic study is probably 50%. Lighting study is probably 95%. In either of those, I can't finish either of those until I get some type of direction or guidance, I should say, on the acoustic study. So we completed the acoustic study with the tent and the location that was shown on the prior submission, and the acoustic information came back. I think we had roughly 75 abutters. 74 out of the 75 abutters were in compliance with the 10 dB at the property line, the state regulation with no impact. The neighbor directly, the one abutter that did exceed the 10 dB was the neighbor directly on our side of Rowley Bridge Road. And so it did, although it didn't impact the residents, it did slightly go over the wall down in the lower lot, part of their lot, towards Route 95. So we had made the assumption that that was going to be unacceptable. Therefore, we asked our team to relook at alternate locations on the property to find a suitable location, knowing that we need to solve for the acoustics first, and then we would figure out the rest of the variables and kind of start working all those other areas. So we came back and moved the tent, I would say closer to Amberwood, is the best way to describe it. And that solved for all the acoustics. So it essentially puts us well within the 10 dB limit on the entire lot line, except on Route 95, which we had assumed that probably wasn't an issue. And so that was a minor success for the team. But in doing that, it puts us in the buffer zone of the wetlands. And so we paused all of our design, the stormwater, the lighting, until we can get some type of guidance on, this is reasonable. And the next step would be to meet with the conservation committee and try to get some guidance on if directionally this would be something that we could overcome or work through. And so we would go try to get on the agenda for the January Conservation Commission and see if that is something that would be reasonable. If not, then we would circle back and we would look at restrictions around live music and go similar to Connemara, where we would go to DJ only music, which would put us well within the acoustical criteria of the state, and put the tent location back to the original spot. So I just said a lot, and I will pause there for a minute.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Actually, before I go further, so our administrative assistant, Lynn Ramirez, has mentioned that some people may not be familiar with Zoom. So I just wanted to let you know that in terms of the public meeting, what we request is that you mute your microphone if you are not actually speaking or participating actively in the meeting. And that if in the event you wish to speak, you can either unmute the microphone and let us know that you want to speak, or there's a hand signal that you can do through Zoom to let us know that you do wish to be heard. So that just want to make sure that people are aware that if you want to be heard, we're anxious to hear you. So we'll get that going. So Paul, do you have your sound person here this evening?
I do not. Nope. So.
Okay, because I mean, I frankly, the sound study was not, even moving it to where you moved it to, it was not as clear to me as perhaps it could be. Because I think, in terms of how the measurements were done and what he was doing in terms of 90% of the ambient as opposed to the actual ambient, and some of the, Lynn, if you go to the next page.
Yeah, I'll talk you through the, so we did use the L90. There was a letter submitted, and tonight I'm not looking for any decisions, right? It's just kind of bringing you up to speed with a lot of work streams flowing. So happy to bring him back and work through the methodology. It's very reputable sound engineer, does this quite a bit. And we essentially, if you look at figure 4, the right way to think about this is the black line is the property line. The average ambient, so he measured ambient sound with microphones throughout the property, let them run for 7 days, 24/7, and the average measured decibel level, much to my dismay, was only 55 dB, which, I would argue it seems a lot louder than that by 95, but so the average is 55 to the L90 method, which is the state certified method, which means that at the black property line on the full perimeter, we cannot exceed 65 dB. And so if you were to look at the center of the tent, which is it looks like an egg with the crosshatch with the white in the middle, and you go through the rings, essentially you would see on the first blue ring, we'd be at 80 dBs of live music. red is 75, the next one's 70, the next one's 65, okay, which would be essentially the limit that's acceptable by the state. And then going out to the boundary, we would be at 55, just barely 55 over our property, our neighbor on the Raleigh Bridge side, the one that originally was the issue. And then the only place that it exceeds the 10 dB is out onto 95. If you notice that that orange ring there, so that is essentially what this pictogram depicts.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful to have the engineer here
Sure.
for the next meeting, because as I said, some of the things that seemed inconsistent to me, that he was talking about, it was 55 all the way from the highway up to Raleigh Bridge Road, which, you know, I seemed inconsistent to me.
Yeah.
Because we'd seen typically 45 on the other side of Raleigh Bridge. So that's somewhat surprising. And you know, just if you could explain the methodology, because it indicated 90% versus what actual, you know, as a definition of ambient, as opposed to what the actual average is. So so anyhow, so yeah, I think that at least it probably makes it clear that, just looking at this, that the prior location for the tent was certainly not going to work for the northerly abutters and probably the people on the other side of Raleigh Bridge.
Exactly. So, well, it was for the one neighbor, and it was essentially up to the Raleigh Bridge Road. But what's interesting about the topography of the property, so we had suggested, hey, could we model a wall, right, a sound wall on the direct abutter? But if you were to walk the property, which is everyone's encouraged to come over and set up an appointment, and happy to host you, to take you around the property and show you what you were doing. The way that property kind of sinks down where the tent was originally proposed, that northerly abutter is actually at such an elevation that you would have to build a 55 to 60 foot wall in order to break the acoustics that would be generated from the tent, such that the house was at such an elevation, that Raleigh Bridge is at such an elevation that the sound would travel up to the house. And so not that it's impossible to build a wall, but it would get to the point where, you know, again, you're probably building the green monster along the property line, which I don't think that's in keeping with anything we want in Topsfield. So we tried to look at alternative locations to say, hey, could we slide this down and see better acoustic, you know, distribution or dissipation when it came to the property line. So that was the original intent, and why we'd reached out to Lynn and people to say, hey, let's pause the rest of the work streams until we can figure out where would this tent be located. So what I could do is have our sound engineer attend the next session and take you through the methodology, which I think you'll find satisfactorily, but it's just the way the elevation of the property kind of dips down. So
okay. All right. So the next steps, you know, seeing this location, I mean, it obviously you're close to, if not within, wetlands or buffer zone.
Buffer, yep.
So how is that going to be addressed? And the wetland area to the north of you, and then there's something which extends down from that. Southerly, is that a stream or a brook or?
Yeah, I mean, none of it's active, right? We only have Google map pics back, you know, whatever, 50 years. So none of it's active. They used it for cattle grazing, but I think since, you know, when they put the vineyard, they just let it grow. So there's kind of thistle in there. So it's not active, but yeah, the wetland that we mapped out, we had it flagged, is essentially that long skinny neck. And then that, I don't even know what you would call it. Looks like a brain, but that top part, And so it is in the buffer zone. It's back from the kind of no build zone, but it is within the buffer. So the thought was, if this is the one location that solves for the acoustic, assuming, we go through the next meeting, the engineering happy with the protocol and the way it was monitored and the calculations, we would go to the Conservation Commission to see if there's a path that we could move forward with this location being in the buffer zone. So go for a special permit for this location.
Okay. All right. So how would you access this tent?
Yeah. So if you were to drive around from our proposed parking lot, which it seems like this still is the old milk shed up there, but you would come around that property outside of the buffer zone, you can actually drive around to that particular location. There was a structure originally on the property where our original tent was shown, but around that way to the tent. That brown area that you're looking at that looks like, again, like I said, a brain, it doesn't continue all the way down the wetlands. It's actually, there's like a forest that goes around that area that you can access it. It seems small graphically, but if you're out on site, it's quite of a large area. And so the idea was that you would access it that way. Also, there originally was across that long, skinny neck that comes all the way down. It was actually a bridge. I have a picture of that across that. So we haven't crossed that bridge, pun intended, but we're looking at, hey, if we can solve for acoustics, and this is the only location that solves for the acoustics, then we'll take that next step and try to work through working with our engineers to figure out, is there a path or a methodology, logistics that we could solve for it to access it.
Okay. All right. So, and what are the steps in terms of you need to go to Conscom? And so you also, what additional steps are you looking at? Because it doesn't seem to make sense for this board to try to approve.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think, look, tonight was about progress. There was a meeting scheduled, and this is the progress we have so far. And just to let you know, we're working on it, and the acoustic information is here. And so the next step would be to meet with the Conservation Commission to talk about if this is a potential location. If we can come up with a design that satisfies the Conservation Commission, then we would come back to you. We'll bring the sound engineer, and we can go through the acoustical pieces of this. Obviously, at that point, if we had a favorable ruling, then we would finish the lighting design and the pathway and things like that, and we could get on to the stormwater and the other elements that we've frozen until we can figure out where we're going to locate this tent. So, yeah.
Okay. One additional question that I have for you is there seems to be some uncertainty about parking. And my understanding was that the number of spaces have been reduced from what was originally proposed, but the tent size is now being proposed to be increased. So
yeah. So good question. So the original tent was essentially a square area placeholder that we had modeled off of Connemara. We've since picked a tent. So we've actually picked a design of the tent, and that has increased from a rough area of 3,200 to say 4,300 square feet. So that has increased, but it's an actual design of a tent now versus just a rough placeholder. The parking area that we just kind of going back a little bit, the parking area we showed that was in the area of the replaced dilapidated milk shed that we took down, that was really into an early response of there were concerns about people on prior weddings and events and festivals they were having here parking along Raleigh Bridge. So we repurposed that area for parking spaces, permeable parking structure using kind of a newer technology. But I think what I plan to do is on the next review is in keeping with farms, traditional farms in New England. So Russell's in Ipswich or Connors in Danvers, obviously they don't have parking areas, right? They just park on the grass and park in the fields and things. So I'm going to have our design team map out the areas on the property outside of the buffer zone that we would typically use for parking, roped parking, escort parking, people, flashlights, vest on, parking people. So there is abundance of parking on this property when you kind of look at the totality of this property, whether it's the road in front of the silos, the area where the original tent was proposed, that's about 60 spots. So we will have enough parking, assuming this tent, or if it does get approved, we will have enough parking on the property. We were just adding, I would say, a semi-formal parking area in that milk barn area to address the concern about the folks parking around Raleigh Bridge for the previous ownership. So we will make sure that we have that identified outside of the design parking that's getting submitted with the storm, what potential overflow parking options we would have on that property. We'll get that highlighted on the drawing.
Okay. So are you increasing the capacity
of the tent or the event size? No, not at all. The parking has been kind of in flux depending on the square area available. But what we weren't really counting on this design, that's kind of a new area that we're submitting to Storm that we're going to create, was just the areas that are currently used or have been historically used for parking. So we're going to add those onto the schematic and show those on the drawing, just so that it's in the total count. And we would expect like a 2-to-1 ratio for the wedding. So, if you have 150 people, we do have 75 spots available identified. So we'll make sure that we have that with that final review.
Okay. All right. So as you've indicated, you'll have your sound engineer come back for the next, so that we can go through that. But let me poll the members to see whether or not anybody has any immediate questions that we could deal with tonight. So why don't we start with Jody?
I don't have any questions at this point. I think, Paul, you described it pretty well, and going forward, in January, we'll take a look at it. So.
Yeah.
Okay, Gregor?
I don't have any questions either. Having gone through the acoustical report, I'm very interested to hear what the engineer may share with us.
All right.
But until then, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. And David Merrill?
He's not there. Can
you hear us?
I can. Hello?
I'll get to the public. I want to go through the board members first.
Oh, okay.
Okay. David Merrill? So I take that to be no questions this evening, David?
David, we can't hear you.
You're not on mute, but could you turn up your volume maybe?
Okay. All right. I take that to be he's okay for now. Okay. Yes. Someone from the public who wishes to be, yes. It says Kirk Dodge.
You have to unmute. Okay.
There you go.
Can you
Okay.
hear
So
me?
yeah, when you speak, if you could identify yourself,
Elaine Dodge
name
and Kirk
and
Dodge.
where you live.
Next door, 247. My property touches theirs. So my question is, he did the sound barrier test, but he did it in the wetland. So now if he puts the tent and he doesn't put the tent there and he puts it back right next to my property, the noise is going to be louder. If it's right there, before he was measuring for the new tent, he was gonna put in the wetland.
That's correct. He's moved the location of the tent, so that's where it was appropriate to do the testing.
Yeah, if he puts it there in the middle of the wetland, the test he did would be accurate. But if he moves the tent back to the original place, it will be louder because it will be closer to me.
Yes, but he's not asking for approval to be the tent, for the tent to be there.
Oh,
He's
he
asking
isn't. I
for
thought that's
approval.
what he was saying.
No, the new location is where he's talking about the tent.
Okay.
Yeah, the results came back unfavorable. So in respect to you all, we
Next to
decided
my
that it
house,
wasn't going to
yeah.
be okay. So we looked for an alternative location to make it quiet.
Now, the other thing is, while I have you, you put your septic in and you put the stink pipe, it's like 5 feet from my property. I don't know if that's the way they do it.
I'd have to defer to the public department as far as permitting and design. Honestly,
Okay. I just have a problem that it doesn't seem like there's any rules and it keeps changing and you've had 4 different designs that you're gonna do. So when you did the sound barrier, yeah, if it's in the wetland, it will be further away from me and the test would be accurate. But if you do decide to move it back, it's on top of me.
Yeah, and that's what the ZBA is in place for, to make sure we don't do that. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd like to talk.
Yes. I'm sorry, who was that?
Fred Parker, 245 Raleigh Bridge Road.
Okay.
I am building an ADU that I should have gotten a permit for this last week, 75 feet from 247. So I'm close to that noise level because it's going to go between my house and 247, the ADU. And I have a couple other questions. Talking about the Camarena house, they're going to build the same size tent. Well, the Camarena house runs 2 tents, one for the kitchen, all the kitchen staff, and then one for the reception. Now, are we taking in the parking for the beer tent, the wine room, and the 2 tents for parking? Not just the 1 tent. They're going to have, say, 180 people, but there's going to be 30 people working in that second tent if they do it like across the street. So, I mean, it's being a tight number, talking about 1 tent when they're going to need 2 tents. And you know, if it's 180 person tent, well, then you got 30 or 40 people working the wedding, the band, the photographers, the service workers. And are they gonna, is the up buildings gonna be active when there's a wedding? In other words, I call it the beer tasting room and the wine tasting room. Are they gonna be open for business while there's a wedding? And that's gonna add, living here for 42 years, that could add 75 cars, because that's how many they park there when they have an event on a weekend, a wine tasting. It was just wine tasting before. So I want to make sure that they're scheduling enough and that my property that is only 75 feet from 247, my future house, is not going to be in the noise section. No one has talked to me, and the town has known that I've been building this for 8 months. So it wasn't a secret. They knew, as you were handing out permits or whatever it is you were doing, that I was going to build an ADU, and it's going to be closer to that event. And I just want them to make sure they're being, you know, the beer tasting and the wine tasting are not open, or they account for how many cars they can have versus the wedding.
Okay, thank you. You've made a couple points. So, first of all, the sound study we'll review at our next hearing, but it shows the extent of the decibel readings to the property line, and assuming that everything works the way it's suggested, it would be below the 10 decibel level all the way to the property line. So you're outside of his property line, so that's not going to affect your ADU in that sense. The other thing is that I want to make it clear again that the only thing that we are permitting and reviewing is the tent. There's one tent proposed for a wedding facility. We are not regulating any of the other aspects of the ongoing operation. So it's outside of our jurisdiction for now.
Great.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, David Larson.
Yeah, it's David Larson, 109 North Street. I had a question related to that second slide where the sound engineer had, decibel ratings at different levels. My understanding is the criteria being used is no more than a 10%, 10 decibel increase at the boundary. Is that correct, Bob? I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
The black line was the average, if I understood it correctly, of 55 decibels. I think what you want.
The black line is the property line.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I just, and it's really a question for you
55.
to review with the sound engineer. I think what you need is the decibel reading at each individual boundary.
well,
I misunderstood the black line, I guess. I thought you were talking about a 55 decibel average there because you mentioned, on Raleigh Bridge Road, it should be around 45. So.
Okay, so yeah, so anyhow, so Lynn has put the screen back up. Again, the black line is the property line,
Right.
and the other lines are showing the gradients of the decibel level, so that it is the highest 65, which would be 10, above 55, based upon what the engineer is telling us, is entirely within the property line, except for where it goes across Route 95.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I wasn't clear on, it said a 55 decibel average.
Well,
And that
the
didn't seem to
engineer
be-
will address that for us.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise the issue for discussion next meeting.
Yep. No, I appreciate it.
That's it. Thanks.
Okay. Is there anyone else?
You do.
Yeah, Kirk Dodge. Right here.
Yes.
I got a question as far as concerning my next door neighbors, Scott Weatherby. He says the building in front of him doesn't exist because they tore it down. There's a parking lot there now. So the noise decibels aren't going to be the same as recorded on that plot plan because that's the farm plot plan.
Well, the sound levels were done when the building was gone. So,
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
When it was bought?
But that's not what you're showing us.
yeah, but it's what's available via Google for illustrative purposes. But the sound levels were done when the building was gone, and it shows what the levels would be within the property line.
So what was the sound level taken out at the street in front of Scott's house?
The sound engineer will describe to us where he took them, but as has been indicated, they were taking on various locations across the property. Okay.
You can tell them.
Anyone else?
No.
Yes, Mr. Harrington.
You're muted, Tim.
You're muted.
I just realized it. Sorry, embarrassing. Anyway, I just everything's going to rely on the acoustics. I think that's what we're getting out of this. I just want to confirm. So the solution was to move the tent closer to 281 Raleigh Bridge Road, Amblewood Farm. It was to move it closer to Amblewood Farm.
Correct.
That is what we're looking at right now?
Correct. Yep. To solve for the one abutter north to us. Correct. Yep.
And can you estimate how much closer? 100 yards, 200 yards? I haven't walked up on the property.
It's about 400 feet.
I was going to say that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And what is again, I don't expect you to know this exactly. What's the distance, the total distance from the tent to Amberwood Farm?
The 1,000 feet, Lynn?
1,000 feet. Okay. Well, thank you for coming tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing what the acoustic engineer has to say, and I will see you at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
I have one quick question.
Yes, Mr. Monaco.
My question is this. This is regarding the tent. So what you're telling us is that no matter what takes place out front for an event with live music and 75 decibels, you have no control over that.
That's correct.
That boggles me, but okay.
Okay. Okay. Then I think, is there a motion to continue the public hearing?
I'll make a motion.
A second.
All right, roll call. Gregor Smith,
Yes.
Jody Kleiniff,
Yes.
Dave Morrell, and Bob Moriarty.
Yes. Okay, so our next meeting is, do you have the date, Lynn?
January 27th.
Okay. Okay, so we will see you all again, I assume, on January 27th, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of you.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you there. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay. Next on our agenda is zoning bylaw modifications. Okay, so we have the planning board with us this evening, do we?
Chair.
The chair, okay. All right, the chair, Martha Morrison, who has her microphone muted.
That's shocking, Bob. Okay, as usual, we started thinking, oh, well, there won't be a whole lot this year. Maybe we can take a break after all that we've been through for the past few years. But as it turns out, these things have been multiplying. And the purpose tonight is really just to introduce our colleagues on the zoning board to possibilities, to have maybe a minor discussion or raise questions in anticipation of our annual joint meeting, which will happen, Lynn, in January. Is that correct?
Yes, I was just going to confirm with Bob afterward, but that would be January 27th, if that's
Right.
okay.
And that's where we tend to agree if we can, and we usually do, on how we should proceed. So the first thing, if you have the sheet that Lynn has up on the screen, the first one is just a couple of tweaks to the ADU bylaw. The Attorney General didn't like our in disallowing trailers. And so KP tells us that the acceptable language is that ADUs do not include recreational vehicles or anything not mounted on a foundation. So that's the language that the AG will accept at this point. So there's that piece. And I guess they didn't notice that no place in Topsfield is, within a half-mile radius of any public transit. They didn't like the fact that we required a single parking space for the ADU, in addition to the principal dwelling. So now we have to clarify if all portions of the lot are located outside a half-mile radius of a transit station. So those are pretty simple, very very quick and easy. The next group really arose, I think, from the zoning board. That is that we take a look at the restaurant definitions and see how we can add takeout to full service restaurants, maybe combine the limited service and the other one that shows up later on. Let's see, the limited service and the specialty foods operation. They have the same parking requirement. They're on the table of uses, they have the same designations. So is there a reason to combine those two or somehow or another take these definitions and apply them to modern contemporary use, that people do order meals from full service restaurants for takeout. So that's another sort of category that's going to require some discussion. And I know that you've been looking at these various permits that are required relative to the highway garage, that they need multiple permits, for restaurants. Is that correct? I believe that's correct.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, when we started to look at it, we started to think, well, why does a single restaurant need 3 different special permits?
Exactly.
Essentially do the same thing.
Right. So the question is how best to combine these definitions, and how to make this manageable, because things have changed since Gregor was on the planning board and we drafted these definitions for the different kinds of restaurants. So that's another category. And then if we can kind of scroll down, okay, conference and event facility. Again, Gregor was on the planning board when we did this one. The concept for a conference and event facility was that it would be a way of using historic structures and properties for something other than a residential use. And so we've seen that kind of drift a bit. So possibly we would add to the definition a facility, located in an historic building. And then, of course, is the whole issue of indoor, outdoor. I don't think we ever intended this to be, event tents and that kind of thing out in the open. The concept was these would be structures that would be suitable for indoor activities with maybe some ancillary outdoor. Such as the Commons that has their wedding venue in the garden next to it, but the main building is where all of the reception and all of the activity, the dancing, the music, and everything else is indoors. And the other thing is that the concept was that the conference and event facilities would not be open for people buying tickets at the door. That is, they'd be events organized privately, either by an individual, an organization, a business, whatever it might be, that they organize the event privately, and indeed they can charge if they wish. But again, this was never conceived of as a place where people could buy tickets at the door to go to a concert or to go to, the movies or to do anything like that. So here are some suggestions. Again, we're very open, or at least I'd be very open to any other approach to this, so that we can perhaps return it to its original intent. Because now you're grappling with a conference and event facility that is not in a structure except a new tent and that is outdoors. So you're all welcome to think about that. You don't have to react right away. The scenic road is not a zoning bylaw, but we're just changing, it says special permit, we're changing it to a permit. The next big one is the accessory buildings. The first thing is that the building inspector told us that the state had added something to the swimming pool regulations that can be interpreted as not requiring a fence. And it seems a little bit odd, but apparently he has been dealing with someone who does not want to put up a fence, but wants to take this other approach that really is not what the building code is asking for, but it can be interpreted that way. So the concept was to make it clear that in Topsfield you have to have a fence, and that these are the standard descriptions of what a swimming pool fence needs to be. And then next to that is the accessory building. It's the same bylaw, but again, our building inspector has been running into issues where people wish to build, at least one person wishes to build a very large accessory building. And apparently, we do allow more than one accessory building on a property. And I can see that there are probably many. People have barns, they have garages, they have chicken coops, they have whatever they might have. But that the question is whether there's some way to regulate, or do we want to regulate the size of accessory buildings? Because right now, you can basically build anything as long as it doesn't take up a big chunk of the backyard. So if you have a 3-acre property, you can put up a pretty big building. So the question is whether we want to do anything about that. And then we have another state mandate by December 1st of 2026, we need to have a battery storage bylaw, a battery energy storage system bylaw. This came under the Clean Energy Act. We do have a solar bylaw and a wind bylaw that we have had them check out. They're happy with those, but we also need this battery energy storage bylaw. Happily, they've produced a model, which we have already kind of converted to Topsfield. There are numerous questions out there, and Lynn and I have been meeting with the Department of Energy Resources representative to get clarification on the regulations. So we will have to get guidance from them about some of the issues. But the one issue that we will have to think about, and it's very odd, they say in the literature that these BESS systems are protected by the Dover Amendment, that they are by right. But then when you get into the model bylaw, they start showing places for special permits, for a site plan review, and we're trying to get some clarification from them as to how you can ask for a special permit for a use that's protected by the Dover Amendment. Anyway, but if we are indeed able to do special permits, we're going to have to figure out what districts these are appropriate for. They do say that even though they're Dover Amendment protected, that you can, in densely developed areas, disallow them. So someplace like the Business Village or Central Residential seem like districts where you would really not want battery energy, lithium battery systems of any magnitude. So we will have to come up with some kind of something for the table of uses for these as to where they would be allowed, where they would be allowed with site plan review, what level, there were 3 tiers, which ones would need special permits. But we really can't do anything about that until they get back to us with answers. Okay, so those are the main issues. Oh, if we go back to the conference and event facility, Lynn, if we can go back there. Some people have talked about wanting to have rules and regulations for the conference and event facilities. We never thought that that would be appropriate because they are different. They tend to be rather different. And that if the zoning board wanted to create rules and regulations, this would, I believe, have to become an actual bylaw. It wouldn't just be modifying the definition, but you'd have to create a bylaw that included the definition and and empower the zoning board to create rules and regulations. Okay, so, okay, I think that's it. A lot to think about.
Okay.
Martha,
Yeah.
the only other one is the historic redevelopment, just it's been pushed
Oh.
off, but the grant application.
Well, we have applied for a technical assistance grant from MAPC for the historic redevelopment bylaw. But if we were fortunate enough to get it, it would never be ready for this year. You know, it would just take much longer to do it correctly.
Okay.
And then this was the appendix for the lighting.
Yeah, this came up last year when we were looking at the, the dark sky bylaw. There were a couple of little features that survived out of everything in the dark sky bylaw, and they're outlined here. But they're in the appendix, the appendix to the zoning bylaw, and that was, as far as I know, simply an agreement between the zoning board and the planning board as to what those standards were. I don't believe that that went to town meeting.
Okay. All right. So Martha, I think, obviously, I think the conference and event facility may be the most controversial one
Yes.
in terms of what we do. So maybe, Gregor, could you speak to it, since apparently you were one of the culprits in acting?
Well, you mean you want my opinion?
Well, I mean,
Of the-
yeah, I mean, something more about the origin and where we are now. And so, yeah.
Well, I think Martha touched on it, that it was very much about protecting properties that we were afraid where the owners could find themselves in a situation where they needed to sell to a developer, or were enticed to sell to a developer because the money was too good. And by enabling owners to use these properties for something like as conference and event facilities, it gives them new life, and we keep the properties. I think that there is, frankly, Martha, if I might just add this, that I think that, well, we had a particular interest in older properties with large homes on them that have some historical value. There, I would think, are probably some properties that don't meet the historical component, but they might otherwise still be properties that somebody might want to introduce this kind of use on. So I think that's something worth thinking about and discussing.
Right. If it's interesting. The historic preservation bylaw draft talks about properties of 5 acres and 10 acres, with some historic value, and this is one of the uses that's allowed. But Gregor, can you think of a non-historic structure in town to which this could apply?
Well, if anything happens, for example, to the Coolidge estate, there's a building that's going to be demolished at some point and maybe rebuilt as a new building.
Ah.
But it's a beautiful property, and somebody might come along and want to build a house there and think about tacking on a barn to create an event facility. That's the first one that comes to my mind anyway. I would think that there may be other properties in town that are large enough and have a building that's just not historic.
Okay. Okay. As I say, the idea here was to try and bring it back to the original intent. If there's some other way of kind of reining this in, to apply to, certain size properties or, certain size structures, again, I'm not sure of how to go about doing this, but I do think it needs to be addressed, because we've seen it expand now to you're having to permit a tent, that is not even in a structure, and that there's very little left of the historic fabric of that property because all of the buildings, except for the house and the carriage barn, were torn down. So the idea was to try and get some handle on this so that you're not faced with other situations like this where people simply want to put up a tent in their backyard.
So, and we have at least one other person who appears to want to do that. So
That's right. Exactly.
So I guess almost every event facility at this point in time, I think, typically has some kind of outdoor component.
Mhm.
And, just following COVID, if nothing else, everybody tries to integrate some kind of an outdoor. So are you thinking about limiting it entirely to indoor
No,
or accessory outdoor or?
Yeah, I would say accessory outdoor on the model of, say, the Commons that uses the side garden as the actual ceremony site, or Willowdale. Of course, we don't permit Willowdale, but they have a whole outdoor facility that they use as part of their events. So it's the language, should reflect that outdoor, whether it's ancillary, accessory, something, so that yes, people can use the outdoor. And many of these lovely properties, if they were to go in this direction, have beautiful verandas and porches and, gardens and that kind of thing. So I wouldn't eliminate all outdoor, but I think the concept was, would be primarily indoor, so as the music and the loud components of the events are contained in some way.
Okay. So what about the rest of our members? And Rosie, I see you're with us this evening. So is any thought about, just saying we've got enough event facilities in town? Let's do away with it entirely, or do we need to modify it, or what are people thinking about that?
Well,
Rosie?
we have 7 or 8, if I could just, interject. If you look at the number of facilities that are available, ranging from fairly simple and not very expensive to enormously expensive operations. So we have many such locations in town. There's one proposed for the highway garage in addition, but that would be all indoors. But So I mean, I don't know whether I'd want to pull this all together and say we don't need any more, but
Yeah.
it's up to.
That actually raises an interesting question. I mean, is a restaurant that has a function room an event facility?
Well, perhaps I haven't been following all of this with the highway garage, but my understanding is that the second floor of the highway garage is intended as an event facility. And maybe it's a function room of a restaurant, but maybe that's how to describe it, but I really don't know. I don't know how to handle that. But I
Yeah.
know in the original discussions, this would be for bridal receptions, for business luncheons, for conferences, for that kind of thing. So it sounded like a conference and event facility to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's something to certainly look at in terms of the restaurant.
Yeah.
Most, I don't know about most, but a number of restaurants do have some kind of meeting rooms or function rooms or something like that. So I don't know, but I don't know. So So Rosie, what do you think?
I don't think we should limit them altogether. That feels wrong to like say we shouldn't have any more. Maybe property size, but I don't, if we do actually get a restaurant or two, I want them to be able to have a patio. People want to be outside when it's nice. We're trapped indoors all winter. I would need more thought, more time to think about if we're going to do anything limits that. The goal is to have a little bit more food and entertainment option for people within reason. I don't want a concert hall. Like that's not, or an outdoor stadium or something like that. But I want business owners to be able to use their outdoor space so that people come here and can enjoy it and spend money here.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with outdoor, some outdoor activity. It's just that you're all dealing with one right now, and we know that there is another person who would love to put up a huge tent, and and it's there's the other buildings on the property are not particularly, significant or historical or anything like that. But we do know that there's at least one other person who would love to do this.
Yeah. And the dilemma is, for example, I forget what his name is. It's like the guy who's running the little music place downtown.
Dan Collado.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a music and event facility. I mean, it's ticket sales, but, it feels just eminently different than frankly what's being proposed for Alfalfa, where we're going to have a band and hopefully sell 180 tickets to it. It just, they don't feel the same.
But Bob, if I can add something, I think it's a matter of scale. In large part, I mean, I think a Good Folk, I think is what it's called. It's a small building. He's limited the number of seats. It's mostly acoustic and there's soundproofing inside, so it's controlled. And I think when I look at these event facilities that have come in front of us, I think the biggest issue has been sound. Traffic and lighting have been secondary concerns. They're still concerns, but they've been secondary to sound. And so when I look at this, I think the idea of having a tent versus an actual building that can be soundproof, that can be controlled more, makes a big difference. And so I think, as Martha suggests, creating some sort of ruling that suggests it has to be the music at least has to, or I should say amplified music needs to be within a structure will go a long way toward controlling it. And then with that idea, if you have a structure, then you have you're limiting the amount of people that can be in that structure per fire codes. And then you're limiting the traffic and everything kind of snowballs into place. Whereas with a tent, you have this kind of idea that can overflow into the lawn and the sky's the limit in terms of the number of people that can be allowed. So that's the way I look at it. So I think having a control and limiting this kind of event to an actual structure will go a long way in solving our issues.
Would fire and parking limit, per space, right? When you have a restaurant or whatnot, you have to have enough parking and only a certain amount of people are allowed in a building on a property, et cetera. I think tents kind of follow the same. You can't have 500 people in a small tent. There's got to be some, and I don't know, but there has to be some type of rules for that type of thing. Or I'm not opposed to an outdoor tent that has music. That seems like enjoyable. We're a community that supports outdoor living fully, I think, with the green spaces and within reason. I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I mean, Jody makes an excellent point on there really isn't any limit on when you've got an outdoor tent and you're talking about a ticketed live music. Who's to say that they stop at 180? If there's demand for 225, who's going to know? It seems much less regulated than an indoor facility, and it's certainly in requiring some kind of an indoor facility and allowing for an accessory outdoor use certainly gets rid of the issues that this board is continually facing. I mean, frankly, I don't think I don't think I would want to live next to a facility that was going to have open music events 4 nights a week that you could buy a ticket and come to. So,
is there anything saying that when you have an event that there needs to be police detail or anything of that sort, or, EMT staff on site? Obviously not, like Good Folk is small, and close to the fire station, but when there are events at Connemara Farm or the Commons, is there a police detail or something that is assigned to that facility for an event like that? There are a lot of towns and cities that require you have a detail when you have an event. I'm just curious about that, or, EMT services on site for X amount of ticket sales for things. And just for I can hear the fair, the 10 nights it's here, and I'm not even in a butter. So I can hear the fair when they have concerts and when the rides are going, and it's just a little bit of noise. And I'm kind of new on the zoning board, so I'm not sure up until what I've been provided for information. I don't think they're talking about having wild music festivals. I think it's, like True North, the brewery. They have a band play, and it's for a certain amount of hours, and then it's over. Assuming we're not letting them play until 1 o'clock in the morning, there will be a cutoff for a time when the music needs to stop, following other ordinances.
In answer to your question, I believe that one of the conditions for the Commons, and the zoning board will remember, was that they have a police detail at all times, because it's right downtown and there's traffic and parking or all kinds of issues like that. The police chief typically, if he's aware of it, asks for a police detail for anything over 99 people where there's alcohol being served. But the police detail serves simply to direct traffic. It doesn't control the amount of traffic that comes. So the police detail simply manages where the cars go and gets them in and out of the place safely. But they don't control attendance, that they would just have to deal if 200 people showed up instead of 50 that were expected. They just have to figure out what to do with those 200 people. So that's kind of the way Topsfield has handled things. And they don't ask for EMTs or fire unless the property doesn't have proper fire protection. At Pierce Farm, the fire department had details there for events before they got the sprinkler system in. But once the sprinkler system was installed, the fire detail went away. But they don't ever have EMTs. It's not like the fair, where you park an ambulance.
Yeah, I don't think that they have a police detail, and I don't believe Connemara has a police detail either.
Connemara doesn't. And Pierce Farm hasn't had police. They just had fire when they were dealing with the sprinklers, but they've never had a police detail. So that's the background on that. That's the way it's been handled.
Thank you.
But I think this is all something for the zoning board in particular to really look at closely, because you're the ones who end up permitting these operations. And as I say, people always say, oh, no one else is ever going to want one. But we know that there's at least one other person in town who wants one. And if it's wide open, if we don't put some kind of restrictions on it, that you might very well find yourself looking at another permit application, for tents or a tent or tents, um, in a rather densely developed neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I said, I mean, I would not want to live next to one of these facilities. And particularly if they're talking about music 4 nights a week, 5 nights a week, all summer long. I mean, it can certainly be onerous, shall we say, to live next door to it. But I don't know. So.
Well, we'd really appreciate it if you could take a look and see how you would like to craft whatever language. The other question, of course, is do you want to write rules and regulations? If so, this has to be drafted as a different type of bylaw. I don't think we can control it just through definitions.
Yeah, I don't know what would the rules and regulations be that
Yeah.
other than, what we typically do in terms of placing hours of operation and
Yeah,
I'm
well,
just not sure.
that's why we never thought you needed rules and regulations because, site plan review, kind of takes care of those issues, everything that you deal with, hours of operation and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Okay.
And they were
Right.
also different. I mean, how could you apply the same rules to good folks as you do to Pierce Farm?
You
I mean,
can't.
They're not the same operation.
So this was designed to provide flexibility for the types of buildings that would be involved. And that's why they're allowed in all of the districts, with special permits. So it was supposed to be flexible, but it may have gotten a little bit too flexible.
Well, now we're finding out where the weak points are.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any other thoughts about the other proposed bylaws? So we need to, but we'll discuss this again in January, all right?
Yes, but hopefully in January we can come to some conclusions, so that we'll get some real language ready for the warrant to go to, the public hearing on the warrant. So the restaurant issue, how do we put that all together? Do we redefine restaurants? What do we do with those? And then the accessory buildings. How do we manage, accessory buildings? I do request that we do include the swimming pool fence information, with more detail, because apparently the state code has changed, or at least that's what Ray says. But it's the other piece. How many accessory buildings do we allow on a property, and how big can they be?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it certainly, at what point do they no longer accessory? I mean, it seems to me like anything more than 10% of the principal structure is not accessory. But then, of course, you get a house with a horse barn,
Right.
which is accessory and, double the size of the house, right? So, I don't know. There are no ironclad rules.
Okay. Well, as I say, as usual, I would ask that you all wrap your minds around these things and come up with something so that in January we can all talk about it, and then maybe have a much better handle on the language of these bylaws. We'll take care of the ADU and the battery energy storage system. Those are pretty straightforward.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Good night, all. I'm going to
Okay.
have my dinner.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay. So now what next?
A meeting calendar for 2026.
Okay, and all
Dave?
in favor?
Oh, can I just point out one thing, Bob? This is why Dave Moniz couldn't come tonight. He has other board meetings the first, second, and third Tuesday of the month. So for this calendar that I put together, all of them are the fourth Tuesday of the month, except for December again, because December you run into Christmas. And so it's backed up to be the third Tuesday of the month, December 15th. That's the only one that's not the fourth Tuesday. And I'm not sure we can get around it other than meeting Christmas week. And I don't think anyone wants to do that.
Well, the fourth Tuesday is actually the week after. Oh, no, it's not.
Second?
It's the 22nd.
Yeah. And then 2 days later is Christmas Eve. So I don't know what people are doing that week, but that seems maybe pretty close if you're having family come out.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 alternates now, so we're out now. I think, I think we should just stay with the schedule that you're proposing. So the December meeting would then be the 15th?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else have any issues or thoughts about that?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to do any better. If you only have one meeting out of the year, that's a problem at this stage.
Yeah.
That's
So
good.
maybe with enough advance notice, Dave can reschedule his other. So we'll see. Okay. All right. So I move that we approve the 2026 meeting agenda.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call. Gregor Smith,
Yes.
Jody Kleiniff,
Yes.
David Merrill. He gives a thumb up. Okay. Bob Moriarty
Yes.
and Rosie DeCipio.
Yes.
Okay. And
And then the minutes for there were 2. There's 11/25 and then your public hearing December 3rd. Jody went through them and she gave me some minor changes, edits. It didn't change content for Eagle Eyes. So the 11/25 would be as amended, and I didn't receive any comments on the December 3rd.
I know I have no comments. Anyone else? No? Okay. I move we approve the November as amended and the December as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call. Gregor Smith,
Yes.
Jody Kleiniff,
Yes.
David Merrill. Thumbs up. Okay. Bob Moriarty
Yes.
and Rosie DeCipio.
Yes.
Okay.
And now a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. And before I do roll call, Bob, can you stay on for a couple of questions afterward?
Yep.
Thank you. Roll call. Gregor Smith,
Yes.
Jody Kleiniff,
Yes.
David Merrill. Thumbs up. Bob Moriarty,
Yes.
Rosie DeCipio.
Yes.